Need help getting started with MIDI on your Nano Cortex? Let's go check it out. Let's take a look at incoming MIDI support. So there's two different ways of which you can send MIDI messages to your Nano Cortex. There's leveraging a USB-C cable via audio interface, and then there's the TRS MIDI Type A cable. And those TRS cables differ in a couple of different ways depending on your usage. But on the Nano Cortex, you're going to have to use a 1/4 inch TRS end in order to be able to use the input that they provide you, okay? So you can't use the pinned barrel connectors with your MIDI. You can do that on the other side. So if your sending device to the Nano Cortex is using one of those types of cables, you can get one that's either a 5 or 7 pin to a 1/4 inch TRS tip, okay, that you can then use in your Nano Cortex. But do make sure that you're aware of that. If you're going to use those cables, that you're going to need something that's a 1/4 inch TRS cable in order to be able to plug into that expression/MIDI input that there is in the back of the Nano Cortex, okay? So USB-C, I did a brief example in my previous video on intro to using a DAW with your Nano Cortex, where I sent a couple of PC messages to change presets from the DAW to the Nano Cortex. So I'm going to put a link to that video in the description below. So if you find yourself needing to send messages to your Nano Cortex via USB-C, that'll get you going and show you everything you need to know. I'm not going to go over that in this video though. I'm going to go over just being able to show you from my small little MIDI Baby 3 here, sending a couple of PC messages to change presets and then seeing those changes occur on the Nano Cortex. And we're also going to go through obviously how I configured that to work, okay? So I'm going to give you just a very quick primer. We're going to go through the book here with just a couple of pages. And as we do that, I'm going to show you examples of how to start to configure these things in the application as well. And then we'll go through and give you that practical example. Before we get started actually demonstrating making preset changes with MIDI, I want to just briefly go through your cable routing and make sure that you understand exactly what you need, okay? So I did give you a little bit of a primer on the two different examples of cable. This is the actual cabling and a little bit more information about that. So I am going to have a hot link to this part of the manual in the video as well, so that we can come back to this whenever you want to. But just really quick, as they mentioned here, there's a couple of things that you need to do. And the main one is making sure that you're using a appropriate TRS MIDI Type A cable. Okay, so that's definitely going to be a major prerequisite. If you're not using that, the only other way you're going to be able to leverage sending messages is going to be via USB-C, as I mentioned earlier. And right above this as well, just to make sure you're clear on that, is the directions for that. I do cover that in the other video that I mentioned earlier, but at any rate, go ahead and pause here if you need this, or click on the link to the documentation, and you could totally see how to get started with USB-C to send those messages. But if we're looking at the cable routing, it's just simply going to plug into that 1/4 inch jack for expression MIDI, okay? Again, this is the type of exact cable you're going to be able to use as a 5-pin. If you're using a 5-pin barrel connector for your MIDI, make sure that you see some of the information here and that your cable is going to be able to work. It needs to be able to be in the same kind of pin out as what they show here to be able to make that work. All right, now we're going to go look at our MIDI configuration here to make sure that we have things configured. First of all, to use MIDI, we want to make sure that the device is set up to accept MIDI, okay? And then we want to make a couple of other changes, and I'm just going to walk through those with you. There's not many, so don't worry about getting that overwhelmed with tons of settings here, but I just want to make sure that you're aware of how this is going to work. So I'm open on the Cortex app. I have it paired to my Nano Cortex. And in the upper right-hand corner here off the main screen, okay, you're going to have these ellipses, 3 dots. We're going to click there, and we're going to go to Settings. And under Settings, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see Expression MIDI Input Behavior. This, by default, is set to MIDI. If you potentially use an expression pedal or do anything like that, though, you have to make a choice on expression pedal and MIDI because obviously they're using the same input on the back of the Nano Cortex, okay? In my case, I'm just going to demonstrate MIDI to you, so I have MIDI turned on. Now, Omni versus any of the other channels. So by default, the MIDI channel configured on the Nano Cortex is going to be 1, okay? There's a lot of use cases why you're going to make decisions on what channel you're going to use, okay? For me, I don't use a lot of MIDI in my configuration. I know other guys use a lot of it, and there's a reason why you would want to use different channels to make sure that you subscribe basically certain devices to certain pass-throughs and things that you're trying to do there. A lot of complex scenarios you could find yourself in. For me though, I don't really need that much. I'm not worried about having dedicated channels for each one or pieces of my gear. I'd rather use Omni in my case, just because I know that any channel that I'm going to send any MIDI message to, I want my device to be able to intercept. And in most cases, if you're just getting started or doing something like that and you don't have a need for a dedicated channel, I'd probably suggest doing this. But I digress. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. All you need to make sure is that the device that's sending the MIDI to your Nano Cortex is sending to the channel that you have configured here. If you don't know what channel that's going to be, set it to Omni, okay? Once you have this configured, which I do, it's MIDI and Omni, we're ready to go. Your Nano Cortex is ready to be able to start receiving command and control messages. Now that we have our settings configured, we've told the Nano Cortex we're using that input for MIDI and not an expression pedal, and we've set the channel 1 through 16 or Omni that we're expecting to be able to receive messages on from our MIDI device. Let's go take a look at what you have available. The main things that you are able to control with MIDI are presets on the Nano Cortex, okay? And those presets, think about what you've seen on the device, okay? So let me go ahead and share my Cortex Control app so you can see the things we have available, okay? So we have 64 preset banks that we can save onto the Nano Cortex, okay? And you can see those by just simply looking at your presets, hitting Show All Presets from the main menu here, and then scrolling all the way down. You'll see you have 64 slots available. Now, one thing that you can do in order to be able to always remember what numbers you're working with is going to be using this little button right here, which is actually going to show you the MIDI PC commands that are going to associate specifically what the index value is going to be for each preset. Now, one thing I'm going to make sure I preface here is there's 64 presets. The way that the index numbers work for sending your PC messages from your MIDI device is going to be starting with the number 0. 0 is technically your first preset. 63 is going to be your 64th preset. So this is a 0 index value, as they call it. So what that's going to mean is, like I said, your first preset will start with PC 0. Your last preset you have available, the 64, will be PC 63 for the message you're going to send, okay? But if we click right here in the upper right-hand corner, you'll now notice, if I toggle, look down here at your preset values next to the names. If I click this, you're going to start to see those PC number values be shown, okay? And if I click down to here, you'll see PC 0 is where we're actually starting. We go all the way down. I don't have 64 on here, but I do have 26. So 26 is my last one with a dedicated preset that I just created. So this is how you're going to find the values that you're going to assign for presets that you want to change with your MIDI controller. Let's now move on to our practical example where I'm going to make a couple of preset changes with my MIDI controller so that way you can see how this works in person, okay? So what I've done is my leftmost of my 3 stomp pedals that I have here, my leftmost is going to be configured with a PC message of 0, which is going to translate to my first preset, okay? And that 0 to 63 index representing your 1 through 64 of your preset values, that's going to be set to 0, so it's going to go to the first one. And then my middle button, my second foot switch, is going to be configured for PC 26. And you'll see if I scroll down on the list here, PC 26 is my last preset that I have available, okay? And you're gonna hear a difference between those two when I switch them. One is very clean and one is distorted. So you'll hear very clearly that we're switching back and forth. But I'm also going to leave the presets menu open here so that way you can see on the fly when I'm making this change how fast it is. It happens immediately, and you'll see that represented in the Cortex app, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. I'll start by playing the guitar on the preset it's on now, which I do believe is 4. Okay, so now you heard that. Let's go ahead and press my left MIDI foot switch. There we go. Now you'll see it immediately shows on Cortex app that now we're on the first preset. Cool. Now let's hit our middle button. This should be now pulling up our last preset. There you go. And if I scroll down to the bottom just to be able to show you that we have that change, it did indeed go to the last one. So again, what I've done is I've configured my MIDI pedal to send PC messages. The leftmost foot switch is set PC 0. The middle foot switch is set PC 26, which is going to be lining up to what that preset is. And I sent these all using my Omni MIDI channel. So I said any channel, doesn't matter, on my Nano Cortex. And my pedal is also set Omni, so it's sending via all channels. So again, make sure when you're configuring your pedal that you have the right channel alignment between the Nano Cortex and your MIDI controller. Once you have that, PC messages 0 through 63 will change through your different preset banks that you have available with the 64 on the device. Let's take a brief look at USB MIDI out. I'm not going to actually be showing any examples of this because I don't really have any devices that I can send MIDI out to at the moment besides my DAW, and I've already kind of explained that in another video. But we're going to briefly walk through the manual here, and then I'm going to show you in the Cortex app itself where these configurations are located. So that way, if you want to be able to use this methodology of being able to send MIDI messages from your Nano Cortex out to a DAW or another device that's capable of intercepting USB-C MIDI messages, you'll be able to do so. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at the Cortex app. I share my screen briefly here so that way you'll be able to see where these settings are at. Okay, so where you're going to find your outgoing USB configuration is under settings. So in the upper right hand corner of the Cortex app, you're going to click on those three ellipses here, and you're going to see USB MIDI out settings. We're going to go ahead and tap on that. And this is where you can configure both the behaviors on a preset load, and you can set these to a specific preset, or any foot switch presses 1 and 2. And you have the ability to then configure some of these controls. And that's just by hitting the plus sign here. You can choose between PC and CC commands, the USB channel that you're going to be sending across. And then depending on if you're selecting CC or PC, this will be the values that you're going to be sending there. And that's bank controls and value, etc. And there's a little trash can icon up here in the right-hand corner. So once you create one of these, if you don't want to keep that, you can go ahead and just click on that little trash can and it will delete that message. Let's go ahead and stop the recording of Cortex. And let's just take a look at the manual a little bit here. So that way we can take another just quick peek at what I was already showing you. So once you get into that settings menu, okay, here's where you can configure these different messages. Like I said, you can make that choice on message type between CC and PC. You can make your channel selection here, as well as your different values. And they go through kind of describing what each one of the CC, PC values are that you have available. Like I said, one of them is going to be on preset load, and the other is going to be on foot switch press. Okay, so those are the two main types of controls that you have on USB MIDI out. There you have it. That's an intro to sending MIDI messages from your MIDI controller to the Nano Cortex. And then we briefly touched upon being able to send messages, MIDI messages via USB-C out of your Nano Cortex on different execution types to a DAW or some other device that's capable of being able to intercept USB-C MIDI messages. Like I said, I didn't go into extremes on the secondary part of that, being able to actually send from the Nano Cortex, but I did make a video on intro to using a DAW with your Nano Cortex, and I have a link in the description below for that. Go ahead and check that out. That's basically going to give you everything you need to know to be able to get started with USB-C out from the Nano Cortex. You're just going to inverse the things that I'm telling you in the DAW example, okay? But as always, please, comments, questions, leave them below. I want to engage and give you as much content as I can here and help if I can. And I hope you found this informative. I'll see you in the next one.